for His providence. And all the things that you think of to thank God for, let this be one of them. Thank God for His providence. I read a story about Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was a great English statesman who is regarded as one of the most influential people in British history. Well, he began his career as a newspaper reporter in South Africa. And there was a war going on at the time in South Africa known as the Boer War. The Boers were the Dutch settlers in South Africa, and the opposing side was the British settlers in South Africa. Well, Churchill was reporting on the war, and as he was traveling from one location to the other, the train that he was on was captured by the Boers. He and the others on the train were taken captive and put in prison. Well, one night, Winston managed to be able to escape from the prison. And he ran through the night over unfamiliar terrain, not knowing where he was going. And finally, he saw some lights in a farmhouse that was far off in the distance. He went there and he knocked on the door. And when the people came, he asked them for help. And when the people of the house discovered who he was, they immediately responded, "Thank God that you came here. This is the only house within 20 miles where you would have received help. All the others would have turned you over to the enemy." Now that phrase, "thank God," is a phrase that we often use when good things happen just at the right time. Thank God, we say. And that phrase, in that setting, if sincerely spoken, is an expression of our belief in the providence of God. Now, what do we mean by the providence of God? Well, sometimes we personify it and we use it as a name for God. God is called Providence. Someone might say, "Providence helped me." They mean by that, God helped me. But most of the time, the word providence refers to an attribute of God that is a part of God's character. This is who God is. Someone might say, "God, in His providence, helped me." Now, the founding fathers of this nation decided to break away from the strongest nation in the then known world and to declare its independence, forming a new nation. And the last line of their Declaration of Independence says this: "And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." The founding fathers relied on the protection of divine providence. That is a reference to God. But what does it mean? Well, look at this verse in Jeremiah 29:11. It says, "For I know the plans that I have for you, says the Lord." God is speaking. And He says, "I know the plans that I have for you. They are plans for good, not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." Now, this verse summarizes the providence of God. The dictionary definition of providence is this: the protective care and guidance of God. Job wrote in Job chapter 10 and verse 12, speaking of God, "You have granted me life and loving kindness, and your providence, your divine care, your supervision over my life has preserved my spirit." And so when we speak of God's providence, it means that God is aware of you. He created you, He loves you, and he has some wonderful plans in store for you. It means that God right now is at work in your life and always has been. It means that God's hand is upon you no matter what you are going through, good or bad. God's hand is upon you. It means that God is present and active. And it means that God has a purpose for you, and he's working out that purpose if you're in a relationship with him and if you're cooperating with him. Now, a classic example of God's providence in the Bible is the story of Joseph. Joseph's faith in the providence of God saw him through what the world would call bad luck. Now, we know there's no such thing as luck, good or bad. It's really a matter of God overseeing our life, being at work, working out his plan and purpose. And again, that is the providence of God. Well, Joseph believed in it. He had faith in it. And because of it, he was saved from anger and bitterness and a host of other wrong choices. And God's plan and purpose was carried out in his life, a wonderful plan. Now, I want to give you a quick overview this morning of the life of Joseph. And then I want to draw 3 lessons that we can learn from Joseph regarding the providence of God. But first of all, by way of introduction, I heard of a man that had a little gas station on a 2-way secondary state highway. It just was a little building on a gravel top lot with 2 old simple pumps. One day, heavy equipment showed up, and the state made that 2-way highway into a 4-lane highway with a median in between the 2 directions. And so that meant only those that were going southbound could pull easily into the gas station. Those going northbound would have to go up the road to the traffic light, make a U-turn, and come back. Well, the owner of the gas station was angry. It depleted his business by half. He appealed and petitioned the state to put a break in the median in order to allow customers to turn into his station. But his requests were denied. He was so angry and bitter. He told his story to every customer that he served. And after a while, customers got tired of hearing it and didn't want to come back. 10 years later, the man was still talking about his misfortune, angry as ever, as if it had just happened yesterday. Meanwhile, nothing had changed. The station was still a little station with a gravel top lot and 2 pumps. Now, had the man looked upon his situation as the providence of God and thanked him for it, he would have seen the opportunity the new highway gave him. He could have made improvements so that it would be worth the while of people to go up the road and make the U-turn and come back to his station. But instead, he focused on how angry he was at the state and ultimately at God. And his anger robbed him of his creativity and strength to make improvements, and it robbed him of customers who didn't want to hear his ranting and raving. Well, Joseph's story in the Bible is somewhat similar, but yet different. Joseph was the favorite son in a family of 12 brothers. And his father showed his favoritism for Joseph by giving him a special coat. We call it the coat of many colors. But the coat was a symbol of the favor and the status that Joseph held in his family. His brothers did not like him because of this. They were jealous of him. They hated him, and they showed their dislike. They did everything in their power to make Joseph's life miserable. Well, one night Joseph had a dream, and in his dream, he and his brothers were out in the field harvesting grain. And they gathered the grain together, and when they had a big bundle, they tied it into what they called a sheaf to be transported to the threshing floor. Well, in the dream, Joseph's sheaf stood up straight, while Joseph's brothers' sheaves bowed down to it, suggesting that one day Joseph's brothers would bow to him. Well, the next day over the breakfast table, Joseph shared his dream with the family. As you can expect, they didn't like it. And all the more they hated him because of it. We will never bow down to him, they pledged. Well, one day the brothers were tending the family flocks quite a distance from their home. And Joseph was sent to give them supplies as well as to check up on them, giving their father a report. He wanted to know about their welfare. Well, when the brothers saw him coming, they plotted to kill him. That's how much they hated him. One of the brothers objected. He said, we don't want to have blood on our hands. And so last minute, they decided to sell Joseph as a slave to a Midianite caravan that was on its way to Egypt. Now, can you imagine the terror that must have gripped Joseph's heart? He was 17 years of age. He was the favored son of a wealthy family. Life had been easy for him. And suddenly he was bound with chains and given to a group of mean men who treated him cruelly. They didn't speak his language, and they were on their way to a country that was completely different from Joseph's country. Now, it must have been terrifying. Joseph, however, never lost faith in the providence of God. He believed God was at work in his life. He believed God's hand was somehow in it all. He believed God was carrying out his plan and purpose for his life, and he held on to that faith. Well, in Egypt, Joseph was sold and bought by Potiphar, the commanding officer of Pharaoh's army. And Potiphar discovered that Joseph was no ordinary slave. He was gifted. And so soon promotion followed promotion until Joseph was head manager over Pharaoh's entire estate. He was in charge of everything that Pharaoh had. But there was trouble in Pharaoh's house. Potiphar's house, I'm sorry. While Potiphar was busy with the affairs of the estate, Mrs. Potiphar was having an affair of her own in her mind. It was the making of a typical soap opera, those horrible movies that are on TV every afternoon. Here was a busy husband, a bored wife, and a handsome young man in the house by the name of Joseph. Joseph, however, refused her advances. And when she tried to get him to commit adultery with her, he ran from her presence. Now, when Potiphar came home, he lied. She lied. And she told her husband that Joseph tried to seduce her. Well, Joseph was convicted of doing the very thing that he refused to do. And as a result, he was put in jail. Now, can you imagine the injustice that he felt? Here he was convicted and sent to prison for doing right and refusing to do wrong. But life is like that at times. It's often unjust. Who said that life would always be fair? The fact is, life is often unfair. 2 times Joseph had been treated unjustly, first by his brothers. He didn't do anything to merit the treatment that they gave him. And then by Potiphar. He was accused and convicted of doing that which he refused to do. He was innocent of any wrongdoing. Well, in spite of this, there was no hint of anger or bitterness on Joseph's part. Now, he could have been angry with his brothers. He could have been angry with Mrs. Potiphar for lying about him. He could have been angry for Mr. Potiphar for falsely accusing him. And ultimately, he could have been angry with God. Why would a just and loving God allow this kind of thing to happen? Instead, there was continued faith in the providence of God. Now, Joseph didn't have any explanations. He didn't know why this was happening to him. He did not know the end result, but he believed God was at work, working out his plan and purpose for his life. Well, in jail, Joseph was noticed by the jail keeper as being trustworthy. You see, whatever circumstances Joseph was in, his attitude and his character was exceptional. And he was noticed. He stood out head and shoulders above the other prisoners. And so the keeper of the jail promoted him as a trustee over all the other prisoners. And in that capacity, one day, he had an opportunity to help some of his fellow prisoners, the butler and the baker from the palace of Pharaoh. They were troubled one morning by some dreams that they had had. And Joseph was able to interpret their dreams. Now, he couldn't help the butler or the baker. He was guilty and he was executed. But he was able to help the butler. He was innocent, and he told the butler that in 3 days he would be restored to his position in the palace. And he asked the butler to remember him before the king and to plead his case. He was innocent of any wrongdoing, and the butler agreed that he would speak on his behalf to the king. Well, the butler was restored, but he forgot all about Joseph. And for 2 years, Joseph remained in prison. Now, how many times in that 2 years did Joseph pray? How often did he think that he was never going to get out of that jail? 2 years is a long time, and nothing happened. There was no hint of hope that the situation was ever going to change. And yet, there was no anger, no bitterness on Joseph's part. There was only a firm, unshakable faith in the providence of God. Rejected by his brothers, falsely accused by Mrs. Potiphar, convicted to jail by Mr. Potiphar, forgotten by his friend, the butler, Joseph kept on believing in the providence of God. Somehow, some way, God was at work, and he was going to work out his plan and purpose for Joseph's life. Well, one night, Pharaoh, the king, had a dream. And he felt that the dream had an important message in it, and he wanted it interpreted. No one could interpret it. And suddenly the butler remembered Joseph. He had interpreted his dream. And so immediately Joseph was called for, and within minutes he appeared before the king. Joseph interpreted the dream, telling Pharaoh that there would be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. And he advised Pharaoh to appoint an overseer to make sure that the surplus of the 7 years of plenty was stored and saved for the 7 years of famine. In that way, they would survive. Well, Joseph became the appointed man. He was next to Pharaoh in power. 1 minute he was in prison, The next minute, he held the second highest position in the land of Egypt, next to Pharaoh himself. And Joseph's plan was implemented. And during the famine, the whole world looked to Egypt for food, including Joseph's brothers. Now, when the brothers came, Joseph recognized them, but they did not recognize him. They saw him as a man of power, and they bowed down in reverence to him. They were asking for food. In time, Joseph revealed himself to them, and when they learned who he really was, they were afraid. And here's what Joseph said to them in Genesis chapter 45. "Please come closer," he said to them. So they came closer. And he said again, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. But don't be upset and don't be angry with yourself for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives." Now notice that. Joseph said, God, not you. God was the one who sent me here. And there's the providence of God. You see, God was at work all through Joseph's ordeal, carrying out the good plan that he had for Joseph's life. Later, when Joseph's father died, the brothers' fear revived. They thought that now that the father was dead, Joseph would get even with them for what they had done to him. But again, Joseph reassured them in Genesis chapter 50 and verse 19. Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you? Now you intended to harm me." They really did. They intended to harm him. But God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so that I could save the lives of many people. There was no anger in Joseph, no bitterness toward his brothers. All throughout his ordeal, he knew the hand of God was at work. He knew the providence of God was upon him. He knew that somehow God was going to unfold his plan and purpose for him. And because of his faith in God's providence, Joseph was spared the stress of a bitter and vengeful spirit. Now, Joseph's experience is our experience. Life is not always fair. The good guy does not always win. The best person does not always come out on top. There's not a one of us here that has not been unjustly treated in one form or another. But what can we learn from Joseph about the providence of God? Sometimes we think that the Bible people are so far removed from us that they're not real. But actually, they're just like us. And their life experiences are written so that we can identify with them and learn from them. And so what can we learn from Joseph? 3 lessons about the providence of God. Number 1, the providence of God is often invisible. That is, God is at work, but we can't always see it. God is at work, but we can't see what God is doing. Now, Joseph, with chains around his wrist on his way to Egypt as a slave, could not see God at work. When he stood before Potiphar and was falsely accused and convicted, it was hard for him to see God's hand in that. When his friend forgot him and for 2 years he lived in a dungeon prison, it was hard to see how that fit into the plan that God had for his life. He could have asked, "Where are you, God?" But he didn't. He believed in the providence of God. God was at work, even though he could not see him at work. Now, how many times have you been in a situation, you may be in one now, and wondered, where is God? It's hard to see him at work in some of our circumstances, but God is at work. His hand is in it. His plan is unfolding. The providence of God is often invisible. They tell me that the earth spins the speed of 1,000 miles an hour. And they tell me that the earth is traveling around the sun at the speed of 66,000 miles an hour. I clapped my hands twice, and between the claps, we moved 30 miles. Now, I didn't feel a thing. I don't even feel the breeze. And yet we're moving at that speed. Well, in the same way, sometimes we can't see or feel or perceive the hand of God at work in our life. But God is at work. The providence of God is often invisible. And then number two, the providence of God is always redemptive. That is, it's always for our good. The most wicked designs, God can turn for his good purpose. Now, at times it seemed in the story of Joseph, everyone was against him. His brothers plotted against him. Mrs. Potiphar falsely accused him. Mr. Potiphar falsely convicted him. His friend, the butler, forgot him. But in spite of these evils, God was at work, turning it for good. Get this, the events of Joseph's life, all of the events of his life, put Joseph in the right place at the right time with the right skills, and God was behind it all. He was in the right place, a palace prison, at the right time when Pharaoh had a dream that he wanted to know what it meant. And with the right skills, God gifted him with interpreting dreams. It reminds me of Romans chapter 8 and verse 28. We know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. Now, you know, we often quote this verse, but let me just take a little sideline. This verse does not say that everything that happens is good. And the verse does not say that everything that happens is caused by God. And the verse does not say that everything that happens will turn out good for everybody. And the verse does not say that every Christian is going to end up healthy and wealthy. But it does say, for those who love God, God is at work in them, and God's purpose for them is good. And it says that God is working toward a good goal, and he'll take the good and he'll take the bad, and he'll bring good out of both of them. And in thus doing, it says that God brings to pass his perfect plan for those who love God. Now, that's the providence of God. It's always redemptive. It always is for our good. And then thirdly, the providence of God is progressive. Number one, we can't always see God at work in our lives. And number two, God is working for our good. Number three, the work of God is progressive. That is, you cannot see how it's going to turn out until you come to the end. It's progressing toward a good end. It doesn't look like things are going good all the time, but it's progressing toward a good end. It's moving toward a good end, but you can't tell the end until the end comes. The providence of God is progressive. Now, the problem is we usually try to draw the bottom line too soon. Draw the bottom line in the life of Joseph while he was in chains on his way to Egypt, and you have a bad ending. I read of a story of two women who met each other after not seeing each other for 20 years at a college reunion. And they renewed their acquaintance. One said, "I got married this past year." Ah, the other said, "That's good." "Well," she said, "not all that good. The man is 2 times my age." Her friend responded, "Ah, that's too bad." The other responded, "Well, not all that bad. He's worth several $1,000,000. Her friend said, "That's good." But the other responded, "Well, he won't give me any of it." Her friend said, "Oh, that's too bad." "But," said the other, "he did build us a nice, beautiful home that's well furnished." "Oh," her friend said, "that's good." "Yeah," said the other, "but it burnt down 2 months ago." "Oh," her friend said, "that's too bad." "Well," said the other, "it wasn't all that bad. He was in it, and now I have his money." You see, it all depends on where you draw the bottom line. You can't say it's good or bad until it's over. And so no matter what your circumstances may be, don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. Don't get angry at your situation or at God. Don't become bitter. Keep on believing in the providence of God. Thank God for his providence. Remember Joseph. God is at work, working out his plan and purpose. And you can be assured that plan and purpose is good. Now, we always can't see God's hand at work, but God nevertheless is at work, working things to our good. And God's work is progressive. We can't see how it's going to turn out until we come to the end. You know, the greatest example of the providence of God happened over 2,000 years ago at a place we call the Old Rugged Cross. And there the sinless Son of God was nailed to a cross and died. It seemed like it was over. It seemed like it was finished. He was dead and in the grave. But 3 days later, the angel rolled back the stone and he wasn't there. He was risen, as he said. He's alive today. And because of it, people who believe in Jesus are saved from eternal damnation. You see, when everyone thought it was over, it wasn't. And so it is with you. You can trust God in the providence of God in your life. Now, maybe you can't see God at work in your situation right now, but God is at work, and he's working for your good. And God's work is progressive toward a good end. And so this Thanksgiving, thank God for his providence in your life. In the meantime, don't get angry and bitter because of some difficult situation. Don't give up. Don't commit yourself like Joseph did to the providence of God. Trust God. Believe in God. God's plan and purpose will unfold. God's providential work in you will happen. And so this Thanksgiving, thanks God for his providence. He's watching out for you. Amen. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for who you are. And one of your great attributes from which you change not is your providence. You're looking out for us. You care for us. You protect us. You have a plan for us. You provide for us. And no matter what our circumstance might be, even that, you're at work, turning it into something good, if we'll just trust you and cooperate with you. And so give us that faith, that trust in the providence of God. And this I pray